Hey, it's Tim and Lisa, and you're listening to the REI Concierge podcast. The REI Concierge helps Americans living abroad find and buy great investment properties in the U.S. From analyzing markets to finding local partners to closing your first deal, we are partnered with you every step of the way. Let's jump into today's episode. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the REI Concierge podcast with Tim and Lisa. We are really excited to be joined by Adrienne Green today. Adrienne is a real estate agent with Keller Williams in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a place that is near and dear to my heart since I have lived there multiple times in my life and I own property there and have family there. And Adrienne, initially I met Adrienne through Gabe Whitmer, who has been on our podcast a couple of times, mortgage banker, also in the Chattanooga area. So welcome, Adrienne. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And I will also just take a quick minute to advertise your YouTube channel. We'll put a link in the show notes, but Adrienne had Tim and I on her YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen that episode, check that out. And I will also just quickly say, as I extend this introduction even longer, Adrienne is a longtime real estate investor, multiple areas, multiple markets in the U.S. And we're really excited to hear more about your journey and your story.
Oh, I'm happy to share all about it.
So let's share all about it, Adrienne. Why don't we start? Let's start on, there's a lot of stuff we want to get into, including your real estate business right now on the sales side, as well as Chattanooga as a market in general. Because like I said in the beginning, we're trying to do a little bit more of some market deep dives this season as we explore some of the partners we work with in certain markets and why we chose them. And to hear it from you guys on the ground is much more useful than Lisa and I just reading off numbers and facts. So before we get into that, why don't we start with your actual investing career? Why did you get into real estate investing in the first place, and where'd you get started? And just kind of take us through your journey from where you started to now, and what you're doing in the near future.
Sure, that's fabulous. Happy to do that. So I in California, and I had studied business and finance, and then after working in that industry a little bit, it wasn't my cup of tea, and I taught high school math. And so that, through my husband's career, took me to Northern Virginia. And so I was teaching math there. And then I stepped back for some other stuff. And we got started with real estate investing, honestly, because we bought a single family house that we thought would be our forever home. And it was just the two of us. And it was much bigger than we needed. So, it had been plumbed for a wet bar in the basement. So we went to IKEA, got everything to make that a kitchenette, and set up a kitchenette in our basement and started renting our basement out. And so, we started with house hacking. It was really because we didn't use the space and we were out in the country, and it was kind of like, we're not using it. Let's let someone else use it and make a little money. It wasn't a huge master plan of, financial independence or anything like that. It was just kind of happenstance. And we knew people who rented out, spaces in their house or former primary residences. And my husband's coworkers had done that. And so honestly, we asked them for copies of their leases and kind of wrote up our own. And that's how we got started.
Nice.
That's awesome. I don't think we've had anyone on the podcast. So everyone I think that we've had on the podcast so far has had that, what do you say, like grand scheme of financial independence in mind. Like they've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad or some other real estate investing book. And they're like, this is what I want to do. But you're just like, we got a big basement. Let's make a couple bucks.
Yes.
I love that. And then you're like, oh, wait. This covers a lot of our mortgage. Let's keep going.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And that's what led to then we got into more of like, reading about, the wealth building of real estate and everything like that. And it was maybe 6 months later, I want to say, that we ended up buying our first pure investment property, because we were like, whoa, we already know how to vet tenants. We know how to write up a lease. This is great financially. So, that ended up being in the Northern Virginia market. We focused on condos as a combination of, my husband working full-time and me also working full-time. Condos were the easy thing to do, and they were relatively inexpensive. So they actually cash flowed, which is tough to find in the Northern Virginia market. So we expanded to eventually 4 condos there. Then we got into out-of-state investing with a short-term rental in Myrtle Beach, which we also bought on a whim. We were there on a vacation because somebody had given us like a free week there, and we happened to have a pre-approval from, a long-term rental that we didn't win on up in Northern Virginia. So ended up with a house in Myrtle Beach. And then in 2020, my husband was working remotely, and we decided to move out of Northern Virginia, and evaluating different markets for both living and also real estate investing, landed on Chattanooga being the ideal place. Top reasons were Tennessee having no state income tax, Chattanooga having great real estate investing, and being, a mid-sized city where there's a lot to do, but it's not so big that there's congestion or traffic or, a major expense to do things. So we have a lot to do here, baseball, aquariums, museums, natural, hiking, river, etc. And you can get to anything in less than half an hour. So we've then since expanded to multiple properties in Chattanooga. There's so many deals here. I feel like we have 4 or 5 houses now. We're under contract. We pick them up. You know how it goes after a while, so it's hard to keep track. And then we're also under contract on another short-term rental in Myrtle Beach as well right now.
Nice. So I would love to hear a little bit. You've already mentioned you've got long-term rentals and short-term rentals. Would you be willing to do some compare and contrast for us between owning the two, managing the two, or I would imagine you've got property management, so managing the property management of the two different ones?
Sure, of course. So long-term, my view of short-term rentals is evolving, is what I would say. So, traditionally I would figure long-term rentals, you're going to have less return, but it's a lot less work. And that's definitely the case. I mean, some of our long-term rentals, we don't hear from them at all in a year. I would say typically in our long-term rentals, we're going to hear from them standard 2 times in a year. High maintenance tenant 4 to 6 times in a year, and it's going to be something like, the dryer's making a funny noise, or, there's been like water leaks or things like that. Or once we had a tenant complain that water, and this was a house, when we first moved to Chattanooga, we moved into a house that we knew we'd keep as a rental. So it was a house we had lived in for a few months. And so I knew it well. And she's like, water's coming in under the back door. Like, well, that never happened during a rainstorm. I was like, that never happened while we were there. Well, they had not cleaned the gutters above the door. So water was splashing out of the gutters onto the door and therefore leaking in. And so when I suggested that she, get some photos or videos of this in that process, she saw the leaf issue and was able to resolve it herself. But let's say long-term rentals, they're pretty hands-off. You're usually dealing with, let's say, 2 to 6 instances in a year. And the other nice thing is, typically, so I tend to do A and B class long-term rentals for reference. Typically people are staying 1.5 to 2.5 years is our average stay, I would say. So you're dealing with tenant turnover, relatively infrequently. The cons are, of course, lower return. And then if you do have a tenant who has issues with rent, that can be an issue. That's not something you deal with in short-term rentals, like they pay before they show up. Versus long-term rentals, if you've got somebody who doesn't pay their rent and you're having to do pay or quit notices, or, heaven forbid, evictions, like that is a thing with long-term rentals that isn't really a thing with short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
And then with short-term rentals, everybody thinks they're a lot more work, and they can be. But I would say there's so many people are doing short-term rentals now. Well, first off, okay, if you're going to do property management with short-term rentals, it's very expensive. And I feel like it's very difficult to get the added, the added return, money in the bank. ROI.
It can be like 30 or 40%, can it, Adrienne?
It can.
Like
it can.
I mean, just for people that don't know property management, it's usually like 8 to 10-ish% for long-term rental property management, but it can be like 30 to 40% because there's so much more work involved. But some people don't realize it's that much more than a typical long-term rental management.
You're exactly right. So in Chattanooga, the standard long-term property management is 10%. And then the short-term rental managers here, some of them are 15 to 25, some others are 30 to 40, like you said. So And I would say in more short-term rental markets, like I've spoken to property managers in, Sedona, Arizona, or, vacation destinations in Texas. And yes, their standard is 30%. Um, if you get a high-end house in a vacation destination, like an oceanfront house in Myrtle Beach, you can usually negotiate it to be more like 10 to 15%. But
Hmm.
we're talking if you're getting like a multi-million dollar house. So,
Right.
10 to 15% of, $300,000 in income is still a lot for that property manager.
Sure. Yeah.
So I would say that while short-term rentals are definitely more work, there are resources that help with that that weren't necessarily available there in the past. So a couple that I have personally run across recently is there's this web platform called IGMS, and that is an all-in-one resource that you can join for a small fee, and it connects multiple different avenues. So, Airbnb, VRBO, a direct booking website, things like that, and you can do it all in one place. You can set up automated messages, things like that, and so it lessens the workload of having multiple short-term rentals. And then another resource I saw is something called Host GPO, which is a group purchasing something. And what it allows is multiple, short-term rental hosts to join for, I mean, it's a $10 a month fee if you have, I think, less than 10 short-term rentals. And that gives you effectively wholesale prices at multiple retailers, linen providers, things like that, because you do have to consider with short-term rentals, you have to have it furnished, you have to replenish the furniture as it gets wear and tear, you have to provide linens, and those are added costs that you don't have with a long-term rental.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And that makes, I mean, technology continues to make our lives less and less difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to hear about some of the platforms that are available.
Yes. And I think that it really makes the difference for short-term rental. And the other thing I think of for short-term versus long-term, and honestly, I like to have both for a diversity standpoint and, like a diversification of portfolio kind of thing. But a benefit of a short-term rental is, of course, that if you're going to visit that and work on it and check on it, you can write off that trip, or at least part of it, depending on, your time and what you're doing. And so that's a big benefit of real estate investing is, those tax benefits. And so I do support or suggest to clients that they consider if there's an area they like to vacation, it could be great to buy a house as a short-term rental there because you get to enjoy it yourself, have those tax benefits, and get a good return.
Just practically, Adrienne, if you are managing the bookings through these platforms, but your short-term rentals are in Myrtle Beach, you're in Chattanooga, are there companies out there that you can just hire for the turnover, the cleaning and the putting out whatever, fresh flowers or a bottle of wine or whatever you leave for your guests and things like that?
Yes. And so that is where I'd say it's very market specific. So I looked at doing short-term rentals in Northern Virginia, and it wasn't really feasible in that market. First, because there were a lot of regulations against it. And second, because it was very difficult to find cleaning services that could do that work. Especially if you're looking, a lot of Northern Virginia, if you're familiar with Loudoun County, has like this wine country and, people, or, horse country, people might have these cute little Airbnbs in the country, but to get a cleaning service that could reliably go out, further from the metropolitan areas and do these turnovers, it was going to not be cheap, and it was challenging. But in an area that's more where short-term rentals are more prevalent, like Myrtle Beach, or where investing is more prevalent, the difference in supply for those needed vendors is very notable. So in Myrtle Beach, there are a lot of cleaners, and they are used to being your boots on the ground for everything. So they take out the trash cans for me once a week so that the tenants or the guests don't have to do that. They check on the house. And then, we do have various handymen that we can use if little things pop up. And honestly, there is turnover, beach areas. I feel like people come and go. And then we use, honestly, Myrtle Beach Facebook pages. When we need a new handyman, go to Myrtle Beach Facebook page, we post there. And yes, quality can be hit or miss, but it's good enough.
So I'm fascinated by short-term rentals. And the more I hear about it, the more it's something that I want to consider, adding to our portfolio. I don't know. So I'm worried about regulation, and I'm worried
Mhm.
about all the logistics because I hate logistics so much, and I hate having to organize people. And like, I love the idea of long-term rentals because, like you said, you might get, hey, my gutter's clogged, or hey, the washing machine's making a weird noise, and that's once or twice a year. And then every
Mhm.
5 years, you might have to do something to the roof or the HVAC. And it kind of stinks when it happens, but like it's expected. But like
Mhm.
short-term rentals, you got someone in there on Saturday and Sunday, and then three more people there on Wednesday
Right.
through Friday. And how do I organize all the cleaning? Blah, 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 blah. So
So our
I
cleaner
get
has an
confused and
app
scared.
too. I get that. So our cleaner that we use now, she has an app where when we have bookings, it automatically connects to her calendar and puts the cleaning on her calendar. So we don't have to do that. And then when she's done cleaning, we get an email confirmation that the cleaning is done. So
Hmm.
technology can help with that. And then the other thing I think, Tim, that will help when people have that fear is consider the returns. So the place I have in Myrtle Beach, I bought for around 180,000, and in the last 365 days, I have grossed 50,000 in bookings.
Pretty
What?
good.
Now that one is really a sweet spot. Like, if you were to buy it today, it's probably selling for 230, 240. Still great returns, but that is what makes it worth it.
Yeah. And you get to go there for a week or two.
Yes. Yep. And that is something else I would highlight too. Short-term rentals do get more wear and tear, and I have seen where they are not as profitable for people who are totally absentee owners. Um, it, it's just that if you don't see it, those cleaners, if somebody's cleaning a house for $100 a turnover, they're not going to have the same standards or eye for detail that you would have. So I do generally say it's a safer bet to get a short-term rental where you do want a vacation or where your family vacations. So either you or someone you trust is going to lay eyes on it, let's say once a year, and just kind of have more of that owner's mentality in viewing it and seeing what needs to be done there.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think that's such a good point. So I'm just trying to think through, like, yeah, no, you're selling me, Adrienne. I like the idea. I like the 50,000 on a $180,000 investment. I'm a big fan of that. So let's talk a little bit. Let's pivot a little bit. We use pivot a lot in one of our podcasts, so I'm going to keep it going. Let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about Chattanooga. So I'm interested in, you said, in 2020, like your husband and you were checking out your portfolio and you wanted to find a new place to go and you landed on Chattanooga. So I guess
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about why you landed in Chattanooga, and then what you can tell our clients and listeners and people that are interested in investing in Chattanooga, why they would want to go there. Because we are
Mhm.
both very interested in that market. And Chattanooga, and Lisa has properties there. And like she said in the intro, has lived there several times. So
Mhm.
let's dive a little bit deeper. We should do a new segment,
Sure.
Lisa. A deep dive. Oh no, Bigger Pockets already does that. Let's dive deep. Well, I'll think of a different
You
intro,
could
but
do deeper dive and the
deeper
one up.
dive. Chattanooga. I'm gonna get sued. Sorry, Bigger Pockets.
So in 2020, we realized we could live anywhere with my husband working remotely. Kind of like a lot of people on this call, he is a government affiliated employee. He worked for a government contractor. And as you guys know, that's so big in Northern Virginia. And we thought
Yeah.
we'd be there until he retired, until COVID. And then
Yeah.
he was entirely remotely. He didn't have to work in SCIF. He was working on unclassified projects. And so we're kind of like, well, we could move anywhere. I can do real estate anywhere. And so for us, with the fact that we focus on wealth building, and that's one of our core values as a family, if we were going to move, we want it to be somewhere that was better financially, right? More financially lucrative. And so the states with no state income tax were, of course, at the top of our list. And Tennessee is one of those. As someone who's always lived by water, I've lived in California, Washington State, and then Virginia. I've never lived in a landlocked state. It was a little scary to think of living in a landlocked state, but honestly, it really isn't too far to drive to beach areas or to fly to beach areas. So I have gotten plenty of ocean even since we have moved.
How do you feel about the rivers? Do the rivers help at all there?
They do. And that is a great point, Lisa. We do have the Tennessee River that flows right through town. There's a dam here. And so there is both a lake aspect and river aspect. And yes, it helps a lot, especially in the heat of summer. We go boating or there's parks on the lake. And so honestly, I find that the weather, people always think the southern heat and humidity. I think the weather here is great.
It's lovely because you get four distinct seasons, but they're much more mild than farther
Mhm.
north.
I agree completely. I mean, yes, that's perfect. And, we definitely get that summer where you enjoy going into the river, but it's not an oppressive heat and humidity for months on end where there's no reprieve. Like you can go to a pool or you can go to the river.
Yeah.
So we originally looked at Tennessee partially because of the no state income tax, and then we were like, where would we go in Tennessee? And for me personally, I was done living in a larger metropolitan area. I've lived in Orange County, I lived in LA, and then we lived in Northern Virginia, an hour outside of DC for nearly a decade. And especially, I have three young children, and it's like to go to a Nats baseball game. It was very difficult with three kids to
Yeah.
drive in for an hour, park, walk, go to the game, fight traffic coming out. Somebody was going to have a breakdown.
We literally did that on Saturday. It took us over an hour to get to Nats Park, and then we had to park like 45 minutes away and walk in with a 3-year-old. It was a lovely game, even though it turned out terribly for us. But yeah, it's a process.
It is, and I was just over that process. And part of my framework coming into this is having three children, the oldest of whom is about to turn 6. Like those things are really challenging at this stage of life. So my thought in moving was I really wanted the size of town that had a minor league baseball team. The size of Myrtle Beach. There was enough to do things, but a minor league game is so cheap and easy to go that, it's not as taxing on the kids. If they break down in the fifth inning, it's not like you paid, over $100 just on tickets alone to get there.
Right.
It's not a big deal to leave. So that kind of, I honestly looked up what cities have minor league baseball teams.
That's awesome. Go Lookouts, Chattanooga Lookouts.
Yes.
Those are fun games too. I always love going to the
Oh my
Chattanooga
goodness.
Lookout games.
They are really fun. And, on Friday nights with the games, they always have, fireworks afterward. And
Yeah.
we did, and my kids made it all the way through to the fireworks. It was quite impressive.
That's awesome.
Nice.
So it was really fun. And the great thing is, we live in North Chattanooga. It's a 5-minute drive to the stadium, and you park, anywhere from a 5 to a 10-minute walk from the stadium. It's so easy.
It's awesome. Chattanooga is so great too, because I mean, you have like everything you want there, but it is a smaller city. I remember traveling back to Chattanooga one time when we were living in the Philippines, and Manila is this huge metropolis of 21 million people. And I mean, it just took forever to get anywhere and get anything done. And we went back to Chattanooga and we had to go to the courthouse for something. And so I called to check and make sure, that they were open and what their hours were and where I needed to go. And she was like, "Oh, but parking can be really hard here." I was like, "I'm pretty sure we can handle it." And there's literally, just parking everywhere. And it was a 2-second walk to the courthouse. But it just, that mentality of those who have not lived in bigger cities and really understand traffic and parking issues. I was like,
Right.
I'm pretty sure
I'll
we
work it
can
out.
handle the parking in Chattanooga.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely have had that. People complain about parking if they have to park in like a parking garage here. And I'm like, but it's right next to the building you're going to. This is pretty darn simple.
I love that.
Yeah.
So Adrienne, let's talk a little bit about so yeah, Chattanooga sounds awesome. Let's look at it from a real estate investing perspective, just for our client. We have a couple clients that have worked with you already to find great places there. Let's talk about like why we would want to invest, like on a micro, macro level. Why does it make sense for a real estate investment in Chattanooga?
Right. First off, I see when I'm talking to people, it's a much more approachable price point. So in 2020, our median sales price was $230,000. That's the median. And that's for all properties, not just investments. So generally, my clients are buying under $325,000. If they're getting, an A-class move-in ready place, they're at $325,000. Higher than that, I really don't recommend to them because, anything like that, you're getting to a much more premium rental. You're going to have a lower occupancy rate because you're going to have higher turnover times, because most people in this market, if they could afford to pay that rent, they're usually buying. So, the nicest rental that you want, you're paying $325. My average price for my closed transactions with my investor clients this year is $180,000, to give you an idea. So I'd say one of the big benefits of Chattanooga is it's a much more approachable price point, especially people coming from Seattle, California, Northern Virginia, the Northeast. You can really get in at a reasonable price point. And then the second thing is, this area is, we're getting both appreciation and really dramatically increased rental rates, because it's such a popular area and so many people are moving here. Businesses are coming here. And so it's growing so much. And that's driving both rental rates for cash flow and appreciation. So overall in this market in 2020, appreciation was 13%.
Wow.
Nice.
Not too shabby.
No. And when you look at rental rates, there was some, apartments.com or some study from them, and it was like from 2020 to spring 2021, the average 2 and 3 bedroom rental apartments, the rents were going up, 15% roughly. So we're seeing notable increases in rental rates as well, which I always share with clients, because if you're looking at what you expect to get in rent, you're using the rental histories that we can pull for you, what things have rented for in the past and all that, but it's rising so dramatically that you have to take that into account.
Yeah. There's really no clear crystal ball as to what the future is going to hold. So you have to kind of say, all right, this is going to be probably on the low end, whatever history you can pull, say it's only going to go up from here, which is really encouraging to investors. Man, I got to buy something in Chattanooga.
Yeah, you do. I was going to say I'd tell you something, but I won't sell any of my properties in Chattanooga. So sorry. Adrienne will find you something.
Yes.
Adrienne, would you mind sharing about some of the businesses that are in Chattanooga that really keep the market energized, and other ones that are coming in?
Yes. So in the last decade, I believe Volkswagen opened a pretty big plant here, and they are just expanding all of their operations here. So they recently brought some more of their higher level staff to the Chattanooga location. I forget the exact department, but it was one of their higher level departments that oversaw this aspect for all of Northern Virginia or North America, came to Chattanooga. So we have a lot there. They're also, their ID4, their electric vehicle, is produced here. And, Volkswagen is one that's really getting into that electric vehicle space. And so that's all done here. That's a big employer. We historically have been Chattanooga, you think of the Chattanooga Choo Choo. There are a lot of trains through here because it historically had a lot of manufacturing in that aspect, and we still do. So there's also like a Mars candy factory here. There's a Coca-Cola bottling factory. There's McKee Foods that makes Little Debbie's here. So we do have that. It has not gone away. We still continue to have that strong manufacturing presence, which brings a lot of people, a lot of employees. But we're starting to get into more of the intellectual white collar space as well. So the power utility here, EPB, in the early 2010s, ran fiber internet on all of its power lines. So Chattanooga has the nickname of Gig City because we can have like gigabit internet here. And my husband, who's a computer engineer, loves the internet here. It's so fast and it's so cheap. We pay like $60 a month. Fabulous internet. So that infrastructure that they put in is attracting a lot of other kinds of businesses. So a lot of startups, a lot of more technology. I'm not going to pretend we're not getting like Amazon's HQ2 or anything like that, but we are getting
Right.
Smaller startups and more white collar intellectual type businesses as well.
Yeah, Gabe was telling us about the internet. You guys are so high tech there. Gabe was talking about that last time you were on, which is
awesome.
That's great. So that's, everything's great. And everything's great. I like that. As I'm thinking, I'm processing things in my head. I'm like, everything's great about Chattanooga. No, it just sounds really good. So I wanted to talk a little bit more. Adrienne, you're in a little bit of, I wouldn't say a different position, but something that Lisa and I are trying to curate in more markets for our clients, where you're not really in the turnkey space that we've talked about a lot, where you just kind of, here's your keys. We bought this house. We renovated it for you. You pay a little bit of a premium for it, but it still cash flows. Everyone wins. Here's your keys. You're much more of, you have put together a team that we have utilized for some of our clients where you guys kind of do what a turnkey does, but allow the clients to get in with the benefit of not having to pay for turnkey service. Did I say that right, Lisa?
Ask Adrienne. She can tell you if
I'll
you
ask
said it
Adrienne.
right.
Yes,
Adrienne, did I
that's
say
true.
that right? So you can find a property that needs work for our clients. They can go under contract, buy this property, and then you have a team of trusted contractors and a renovation team that can go in and bring that puppy back to life, and then put it under property management with another team member. But you're all not under the same roof. So I guess I'm going to shut up and just let you explain how that works, because you're going to do it much better than me. Because we like it. We like how it works, but I'm doing a terrible job explaining it.
No, you're doing great. All right. So I kind of view, when people buy an investment, if they're not buying from a turnkey company, people often, I kind of view, do you want to flip? Do you want to burr? Or do you want to buy rent ready? And honestly, not too many people flip in the Chattanooga market because rental rates are so good that it usually makes more sense to burr. I do have the occasional client who really just needs to churn flips in order to build their cash that they have on hand, their cash reserves. But that's rare. Most people are choosing to burr or to buy rent ready because we have these great service providers here. So, you had kind of touched on more, I think, of that burr option. And so, if somebody wants to do that or to kind of do their own turnkey effectively, the great thing is there's so many real estate investors in Chattanooga, and honestly, other people like me who have moved here because of the investing and because of the lifestyle, that they now help other real estate investors. So I have several contractors who are real estate investors themselves who can go in and do that renovation for you. And they are used to working with out-of-state investors. That is the majority of their clients. And they're not, they know. Personally, I love it. I have one property that I'm burring here with one of these contractors, and I don't want to make the choices. I am all about, I'm not going to live there. I don't need to choose what flooring goes in. I don't need to do the Lowe's order to choose the lights. And these contractors, they handle it all. You just say, give me the bang for my buck renovation, and they do it.
That's awesome.
It's really nice.
So, if you want to have more say in it, you can to an extent, as long as you're not going to be a high maintenance client for them. But, or if you want every house to be a little different, like I know one guy, he wants every house to be a little different. So they choose a slightly different paint color for everyone. But if you don't care about that, personally, I don't. I'm just like, do what you want. I know they're going to do crushed ice color on the walls. They're going to do butcher block counters. They're going to do LVP flooring. I did get to choose whether I wanted the gray tint or the brown tint. And even that, I was like, I don't really care. Just do it.
Get it done.
But, so we do have the contractors that are fabulous. They're investors themselves. They work with real estate investors, including out-of-town investors. Now, I will, of course, I'm always upfront. They're busy and it's going to take longer than you want it to take. But I will say I think my renovation, my burr is a $60,000 renovation, and they said 90 days. Last week they said they are on track to meet that 90 days, and if anything, they're a little under budget. So
that's awesome.
I'm happy with that.
90 days is nothing.
Yeah, I mean it was mostly cosmetic, but $60,000 is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1-level house. Kitchen was rough, bathrooms were rough, but mostly cosmetic stuff. So it's happening. It's going well. And then we have several good property managers here as well. So some of my clients, they start the introduction with a property manager early on in the process. Some don't. So if they do, then once we are under contract and we're through that home inspection contingency, my standard is that then I send an email to the client and the property manager and I say, here's when we're supposed to close. Here's the listing. Here's all the photos I have of the house. Here's a copy of the inspection report. Here's the contractor who's going to do the work, and just kind of give that property manager everything. And they are used to, knowing that and taking over, either right at closing if it's rent ready or when the renovation is done. If people do not have if they've not already spoken to a property manager or they're new to the area and they don't have a relationship, I do an email introduction with all those details to 2 different property managers so that the client can then interview both and feel, determine who they think is the best fit.
That's great.
And then the property manager, they take it from there on out. We coordinate getting them the key at closing. And my property managers are all investors themselves. So, Lisa, you mentioned Gabe on the lender side. He and his team are all investors. My contractors are all investors, and same thing with my property managers. It's important to me that everybody that I work with has an investor mindset to best serve our investor clients.
Yeah, no, that's really important.
I love that. Yeah. And I think it's probably time, I mean, as it is every episode, for what we like to call it.
It's time for Tim's Selfish Questions.
I have a question about multifamily. So all of our clients who are new to investing, I would say almost all of our clients are very tantalized by the idea of small multifamily, as I was and am too. I mean, everyone wants the duplex, the triplex, the quad because they read something about how it's better cash flow for the same amount of money. And, everyone has strong opinions, like Lisa and I like to say. And we like to harp that there's no one right way to do this real estate investing thing, but you can go kind of any path you choose. But I'm always interested to learn about the multifamily scene in different markets, because some markets, they simply literally do not exist. Some markets, they're never available. Some markets, they're somewhat plentiful, but most of them need a lot of work, like in, Southeast DC. So what is the multifamily scene look like in Chattanooga, whether it be duplexes, triplexes, quads? Let's not get into apartment buildings, but small residential multifamily that you can get a conventional loan on. What's that look like currently?
That is a great question, Tim, because I would also echo that a lot of my clients are really into multifamily. And we do have what I call a respectable amount here. Moving here from Northern Virginia, there was no multifamily in Northern Virginia at all. And so here we do have a respectable amount of, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. What's interesting here is we might have like a street with multiple multifamilies on it. Generally, the multifamilies can be very well interspersed with single families. And so
Oh,
I
interesting.
feel, we can have multifamilies in A class, B class, and C class areas. I've had a client in a C class area actually followed by a duplex that was on a street where every house you could see from that was a single family. I've also had clients buy a duplex in an A class area that was on a cul-de-sac entirely of duplexes. So that's what I'd kind of say. We have it by itself. We have it on maybe like a street of multifamily, but it's not like there is a segment of town or certain area or certain class that has it. It's in all property classes.
That's really interesting and very, I would say, unique. Like, I don't think there's many markets where that's the case. It's typically either or. Like, you very rarely see like a duplex or triplex interspersed between a street of single family. So that's actually
Right.
super cool. Like, you can actually end up buying like a single family on a street and then buy a duplex on the same street. It's kind of a cool little niche.
It is.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's why I share it, because it is interesting to understand that aspect of it. I would say that honestly, from March on, so our spring rush here really started in March, and from March on, the multifamily market here has had a lot of demand. I suspect that it's because of bigger pockets and real estate investing really promoting multifamilies,
Yeah,
and so
totally.
and so if you look historically, like pre-March, they sold at what we would like to buy them at. They sold at, you're going to get a better return for your purchase price. You're going to have the safety of, not having complete vacancy and things like that. But honestly, since March on, if you compare a single family and a multifamily investment here side by side, generally, when you're looking at like your gross rent to your purchase price, it's going to be better on a single family than on a multifamily here.
I think, and that's such a good point. Lisa makes that point with all of our clients, because the clients that come to us and say, listen, I want multifamily because the returns are better, Lisa always kind of shrugs her shoulders and goes,
Right.
that depends. That's simply not always the case. It depends on the
Right.
market. It depends on the time. So I think that's a really valuable point to drive home, especially to newer investors, that black and white situation where you can just get a multifamily and get better returns. As case in point with Chattanooga, that's not the case right now. Better returns are on single family. So are you better off purchasing 2 single families than a duplex? Probably right now,
Yes.
right?
Often, yes. And our single families are so reasonably priced here that can be very doable,
Yeah.
So, I'd say maybe 5 to 10% of the transactions I've had this year have been multifamilies. And some have popped up. We have our client in common who did get a great deal on a duplex.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, it can pop up. Honestly, when clients come to me and they're looking at multifamilies, I usually recommend that we look at single families as well, just because there's such greater supply there and there tend to be better returns. But every once in a while, a great multifamily deal does come up.
No, I think that's a good point. Just know your market, know what you're looking for, know the returns that you need to make that investment worthwhile for you and get the property or the asset that works for that. I think not getting pigeonholed into one or the other is super important.
Yeah, I think that's key. The other thing I point out to people about multifamilies here is while we have a respectable amount, the volume of closed transactions that can be used for an appraisal is still going to be lower. And so, some people come to me and they really want to burr a multifamily. And I always warn them that appraisal for that refinance is not, it's more of a, roll of the dice. It's less of a sure thing because so much of an appraisal depends on having good comps. And if you've only like right now, under 300,000, we have maybe 20 multifamilies on the market throughout the entire MLS area here, to give you an idea. And some of those are overpriced if they've been sitting there for several months. So it's not like there's 20, actual deals. And so our volume of what sells is so low that appraisal is a little more dicey.
That's a great point too. Yeah.
So Adrienne, as we near the end of our conversation, I would love to hear from you. What are some of your words of wisdom that you offer to out of state / out of country investors?
Great question. I have had roughly 60 transactions closed this year, and nearly all of them are with out of state or out of country investors. And so I would say the first thing I would say is, okay, I guess my first thing, and honestly, it applies to everyone, is I'm all about the numbers. My background is, business and finance and then teaching math. But sometimes people can definitely get into analysis paralysis. I know, it's something we've talked about before, Lisa and Tim. And so I would say, you run your numbers, but don't get caught up on them. And something I tell clients again and again is we use conservative numbers. I mean, and I know that in not every market and not every person's going to do that. But if I give clients, rent estimate and, or if a property manager gives clients a rent estimate or, vacancy rate, we are all giving them conservative numbers because we want everybody that I work with, we want clients to have it be so easy and so profitable to invest here that they want to do it again and again. And we're going to get that repeat business by giving you numbers that you're easily going to meet or exceed. So like the contractor gives conservative numbers, the property manager does, I do. And so what I tell clients coupled with that, or the wisdom part of that, I guess, is, if you're running your numbers and something looks like a single, go ahead and take action on it, because when the actual numbers come in, that single is going to be a double, a triple, or a home run. And
I like that.
As a personal investor, like I know there are so many times when the numbers, we walked away because it only looked like a single and we wanted to keep our equity for something that we knew would be a home run. But then in hindsight, we were like, that would have been a great deal. That would have been a home run.
Yeah. Yeah. And it'll almost always be a home run within 5 years, regardless of what you do. Right. Like even if it's not a home run in that first year, like it's going to end up being a home run. Just get on base.
I agree. And that would be, another thing I would say, Tim, that actually my husband and I were just talking about last night was, you're looking at these numbers now, right now, what you're going to rent it for within a month of buying it, but you're going to be able to rent it for, typically $100 to $150 more next year per month. And
right.
It keeps going like that. And so things are going to be fabulous. And then, in 4 or 5 years, you're going to do a cash out refi. You're going to get all your equity back out in order to buy something else, or you're going to 1031 and then do a cash out refi. And it's really just like, take that thing that looks like a single and just sit on it and don't stress, because it's going to be a home run within a couple years for sure.
Yeah, that long-term perspective is so important. And especially, we talk about it with new investors because it can be incredibly stressful in the first 6 months when things go wrong and it takes longer to place a tenant or something happens with the tenant that's in and they aren't able to pay rent. And again, it's always, okay, go back to the long-term plan, right? The 10, the 15-year outlook. And that can be a challenging transition for folks.
Yeah. I think that's true in everything in our culture. We look at things with 30-minute meals or everything like that. We want it really short. There's not many times. So a little aside, fun fact you guys will get to learn. I actually did a hobby farm in Northern Virginia for a few years. And when you deal with any kind of like animals or livestock or farming, you really get a different perspective on time. And I think that experience has been really helpful with real estate, because like if you've ever raised a chicken, like a chick from You often get them shipped as like, 1 or 2 day old, chicks, or maybe you hatch eggs. They're not going to lay for 4 to 5 months.
Yeah.
And people don't think about that. Like, you are not going to get eggs from that chicken for 4 to 5 months.
Yeah.
And people just, and that's one of the faster things. If you're raising an animal for meat, you're talking about a much longer time span, And so I think that long-term perspective is very lacking in a lot of things in our culture. And real estate investing is an area where it's necessary.
Yeah. I love
That
that.
is a great analogy. I like that. Yeah.
That's really cool that you had a hobby farm too.
Yes, it's like it's a good little, if we ever need to do a little trivia. I know how to hunt deer. I know how to process chickens. I know how to do all kinds of. We had milk goats. I know how to milk a goat.
Wow. Will
This is
you
great.
do this again in the future at some point, you think, Adrienne, or one time was enough?
I think that no matter how expensive anything is at a farmer's market, it is a great deal compared to producing it yourself.
It's a lot of work, I hear.
Oh my goodness. I will say that the other thing I learned from doing a hobby farm is I greatly appreciate my job in real estate. It is a joy to be able to work with people, and most of that job is done in air conditioning.
Huge bonus.
I love it. Love it. Well, Adrienne, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been great to learn more about you, and we really appreciate your insights on the Chattanooga market. We will include all of your contact information in our show notes, as well as a link to your YouTube channel and anything else that you would like us to share. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to talk real estate. It's one of my favorite things.
Ours too, indeed. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the REI Concierge Podcast. We would be thrilled if you would share this and take some time to leave us a review. And until next time,
happy real estate adventures.